I'm Shannon Moore, and this is Formation. Over the next few weeks here on the podcast, we are visiting with some local leaders and leaders from beyond our community to talk about the Love Your Neighbor initiative that is going on here at UCC. I hope that you will join us for these very special episodes. Welcome to Formation, a weekly podcast from University Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas, where each week I sit down with people and we talk about faith. Today, however, is a little different sort of episode. Russ, you were on the podcast not too long ago, but I want to talk about something different today. We are in the middle of a campaign, a grassroots campaign, as you call it, called Love Your Neighbor. Can you tell me a little bit about why you felt this was important for our church to do at this time?
Sure. So back in probably the spring, as I was looking forward, I typically try to think 6 months to a year ahead in terms of sermon series and that sort of thing. And back in the spring, I just had this growing uneasiness about this fall, knowing about the campaign, the election cycle. And
Wait, there's an election this year?
Yeah, it's coming. It's in a few weeks.
Oh,
you might want to.
Okay. Yeah. Good to know.
I was on a roll there, Shannon.
Sorry, go ahead. I just can't resist
the
opportunity.
Yes,
to,
exactly. And I just had this growing uneasiness that knowing how things were even back then, anticipating that it was going to get even worse, that it was going to get more contentious, that we were going to be more polarized even than we have been in the last 4, 8, 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we faithfully respond to that? You know, my initial reaction, in all honesty, was let's just put our heads in the sand and pretend like it's not going on. And, you know, but I knew that wasn't the faithful response.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I also didn't want to come across as being ultra political and run the risk of coming across as being partisan in any way, shape, or form. And so how did we address the issues that are going on, but in a way that is faithful and inclusive without being divisive? And so I just kind of had this idea. And I had seen there was another church in Kansas City that did this a few years ago. And I remember thinking, that's a really good idea. And so I brought it to the clergy staff and said, here's a thought. And we just kind of unpacked it and began thinking about it and looked at that.
Well, I remember when you first announced it to the congregation, you know, really a month or 6 weeks before the campaign was starting, you just kind of brought it up. There was immediately a sense of acceptance of that idea. It's like something people were craving.
Yep.
As everybody sees, and that word you used earlier, polarized. I mean, it really does seem to be that everybody's on either end of a spectrum.
Right.
I feel like many of us are here in the middle, but it doesn't seem
Right.
that way with what we see on social media and the news and that sort of thing. It feels very, very polarized. And how do you come together in that? What is it, do you think, about those words, love your neighbor, that just struck such a chord?
I think I keep hearing stories in the course of this of, you know, my neighbor has this campaign sign and I feel the exact opposite. And so we struggle. It has become, in this polarized culture that we live in, that there are some issues and some candidates that you're either for me or you're against me. And we have forgotten that first and foremost, we are brothers and sisters, that we are family members, that we're neighbors. And Jesus was all about bringing people together and finding ways to bring people together as opposed to take sides and to constantly battle with one another.
Mm-hmm. And it seems, it's not a foreign concept, but in this culture it almost seems like a foreign concept because most everybody seems just ready to fight or ready to argue or ready to disagree. And just those words, love your neighbor, which of course Jesus taught and he was teaching from Leviticus, I think, or Deuteronomy. This ancient wisdom
Right.
and just those words are so simple. It's like the song "Be Still and Know That I Am God." There's so much power in just a few words, and just that reminder that it's so important to love each other. Have you seen? Well, let's talk about some of the.
Let me tell you an interesting story that happened to me, and I shared this in one of the services recently. That last week I had lunch with a good friend of mine and was telling him about this, and he had seen it, and not a church member, but somebody in the community that had seen it and was drawn to it. And he said to me, he says, "Russ, what you're doing is really radical." Because it's so countercultural in this time when it's take sides and fight like hell, that what you're doing is really kind of radical. And so that was on Thursday, I think. And then on Sunday, after the 9 o'clock service or after our early service, somebody came up to me and said, what I love about this is that it's just so simple, right? It's like you said, that single phrase that just sort of centers us and reminds us of what we're to be about. So it's radical and yet simple at the same time.
And so much of Jesus' teaching
absolutely.
is that way.
Absolutely.
Not easy, but simple.
Right. Yeah, and that's the other thing that I should have said to that person after this 9 o'clock service is, yes, it is very simple to comprehend, to understand, to wrap our heads around. It's not always so simple to actually go out and do it and to do all that.
Let's talk a little bit about, you had a vision as we were coming up with this campaign for ways to get the word out and some of the merch, for lack of a better term. We're not selling it, but
sure.
Tell us about some of the things that we have done to help get the word out in the neighborhood and the community.
Well, I think the main thing is that the yard signs that folks have been putting in their front yards. I've also seen them in businesses around. It's been kind of cool. I went to the dry cleaner the other day, and there's our sign. Yeah. So to see those as we drive through, I think that's one of the big things. We're in the process of putting larger ones that simply say, "Love your neighbor," next to those places on the streets where you see a lot of other campaign signs, and this is just kind of just a reminder in this time that we're called to love our neighbors. As a way of saying, part of the way that I see that is not just a reminder to those of us that are driving through, but also those people that are being represented, those ones that want to be our leaders.
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
say, this is what we're going to expect of you, is that we're going to expect you to lead with kindness, with love, with bringing people together instead of finding a reason to bring people apart.
I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah. That's for somebody who is actually running for office to see one of their signs and then see that right beside it, hopefully would make a difference. That's really cool. Before we take a break, I'm wondering if you'll share the story that you told the clergy recently about when you were leaving the grocery store.
So the other night I went and I had ordered sushi and I came out. And I came out with my sushi, and I was ready to go home. And it was a long day at work and here at the church, and I was tired and I was hungry. And I was getting in my car, and I set my sushi in there. And as I was starting to get in, I looked out of the corner of my eye, and over in the corner of the parking lot, there was a woman there that kind of was standing there and looking at her car, and her tire was flat. And I went, oh, man. I really just want to go home, but so I was like, well, and so I went over and I said, do you need some help? And she said, yeah, I haven't, and she had no idea. So I ended up changing her tire and, it's hard. Sometimes you actually have to practice what you preach.
Literally.
Yes, literally practice. And I almost says, yeah, this is my, I think I did tell her. She goes, you're so kind. And I said, yeah, you know what? This is my good deed for the day. And I didn't say anything. My church is doing an act of kindness, and I'm going to put you on social. I'm not going to do anything like that. But
Yeah. Well, I hope you did go on our app and click good deed.
I haven't done that. I need to do that because that's one of the things that we want to be able to do that we haven't really. Maybe in the next few weeks we can do a better job of kind of saying that we want this grassroots initiative, this campaign, to kind of spread. And part of the way that we can do that is sharing what this is all about.
Right, acts of kindness.
Acts of kindness. And then we also have a couple different videos and that sort of thing that you can share on your social media that just says, love your neighbor in this divisive time and all that sort of thing. I think there's 3 different videos that our team put together, and they're really great.
That's really cool. We're going to take a quick break, and then we will be right back continuing this conversation with Russ Peterman.
Hi, I'm Russ Peterman, Senior Minister of University Christian Church Disciples of Christ here in Fort Worth. And I don't know about you, but one of the things that keeps me up at night is the division that I see in our nation. And as this 2024 election cycle heats up, communities and neighborhoods are going to become even more divided, less kind, more polarized than we already are, maybe more than we've ever been. But at UCC, we believe that Jesus offers a better way of engaging one another. He calls us to love our neighbors and to actively embody kindness. You see, we believe that as a church, we need to be active in bringing our community together. And so we're going to do just that with a church-wide grassroots campaign that we are calling Love Your Neighbor. And this neighborhood movement will focus on actively modeling kindness, working towards inclusive community, and doing all that we can to undo polarization. So I hope you'll join us in this movement, because in a time filled with negativity, we all have a choice to make. We can choose to love our neighbors. And if we do that, we will have accomplished more than just making it through an election. You see, we have the power and the courage to make our neighborhoods, our community, our nation look even more like the kingdom of God.
We are back, and we're talking with Reverend Dr. Russ Peterman about the Love Your Neighbor campaign happening here at University Christian Church. I want to go back a little bit, Russ, and talk about the sermon series that you did before this Love Your Neighbor campaign, which was about slowing down, taking your time. I feel like, and I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it seemed like such a great forerunner to this campaign. Can you talk a little bit about that sermon series and how what the response was from that?
Sure. So, full transparency, it was not. I did not.
Well, the Holy
make that
Spirit.
Connection. Yes. Right. Yes. If it was a good idea, it was surely the Spirit, not mine. No, I did not think of that months ago when I was pulling this out. The response to that series, I think, in some ways, has been more positive than perhaps anything that I've done in the 7 years I've been here. People really responded, really spoke to this sense of, yes, I'm overwhelmed, I'm addicted to my phone, I feel like I'm constantly in a hurry and I'm rushing, and the other thing that people really loved mostly were the weekly kind of, here's your assignment, here's what I want you to do. Although there were some who came back and said, please don't ever make me drive in the slow lane again. I did have one person say, I was driving in the slow lane and I got rear-ended too. That's an actual true story. Somebody did. Yeah. I got rear-ended driving slowly. And
luckily, we had everybody sign that release form.
Right.
Before.
Yeah. Exactly. I said, "Were you hurt?" I was like, "No." Okay. Then hey. And so that was people really kind of responded to that. And,
one of the other things you suggested was related to the grocery store, and
The long line,
letting
yeah.
getting in the longest line or letting somebody in
Right.
front of you. I had another experience at the grocery store where I was waiting to get into one of those frozen or cooler doors.
I told that story once.
You did.
I did.
And this woman just literally stood there for minutes in front of the door where I needed to be. And I saw what I needed. I could have just said, "Excuse me,"
Yeah.
but I decided to wait.
And what did you do, Shannon?
I took a picture of her and sent it to you. And asked if I still got credit.
That's right. This woman is trying my patience. Do I still get credit? I'm really annoyed.
I think what's so great about that lead up to the love your neighbor is that being so intentional about slowing down
Right.
gives us the space to lean into this love your neighbor
Right.
idea. And so I want to share another adventure I had based on this slowing down. You mentioned driving in the slow lane. I went to a conference in Plano or somewhere up there, and I do not like being in heavy traffic. I mean, I take back roads everywhere I go. It might take a little longer,
Yeah.
but I'd rather take longer while I'm driving than be sitting in traffic. But I had to go in rush hour
Right.
to way over Plano, and I decided I was gonna take the slow lane, be in the slow lane. At one point, there was a truck that was trying to get over in front of me with a sticker of the candidate I'm not supporting, and my inclination was like, "No, you cannot get in front of me." But then I backed off, let them in. All that to say, when I got there, I was a few minutes late.
You were slow and loved your neighbor.
I
at
was
the same
slow, and I
time.
loved my neighbor.
That was really good. You get double the points.
Yay! I love points.
know you do,
I do
Shannon.
love points. But I wasn't stressed out when I got there. I was a couple minutes late. Nobody died because of it.
Right.
I would have probably gotten there a minute earlier if I had sped, and
Right.
So it really was a combination of these two sermon series in one trip, and I really appreciated that. Another thing that we're doing is a cohort that
Yeah.
you are participating in.
Right.
Can you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that and how it's going?
Sure. A couple of years ago, I went to a conference, and the speaker was a guy by the name of Alan Hilton, who is a minister in the United Church of Christ, lives down in Austin, and he's written a book called A House United. And in the opening pages of the book, he says, quoting Jesus, who was quoting Abraham Lincoln. No, said that backwards. Abraham Lincoln.
We're with you.
Yeah, yeah. Abraham Lincoln said at the very start of the Civil War, quoting Jesus, "A house divided upon itself cannot stand." And Alan's thought is, the church, in our ability to come together, can show the rest of the world how we can unite, right? How we can come together. And so he has started a cohort of, I think, 7 different churches across the United States, multi-ethnic, some more progressive, some more evangelical. And we get together online every Tuesday night. I've gathered a group of about 10 ambassadors here at the church, and we do Bible study together. We call it Big Tent Bible Study. And we break off into groups all online, and have conversations about, kind of how did you come to have some of the political opinions that you have, because once we know some of the backstory and what we can have greater empathy and compassion and awareness. We're not there to try and change each other's opinions, but to show another way. I think it's interesting that every single book in the New Testament talks at some point about some sort of conflict amongst believers. Differences in opinions. You look at all of the letters, Paul's letters, and even in the Gospels, Jesus continually telling his disciples, you got to love each other, you got to forgive each other. And so the church really does have baked in its DNA this ability to come together, to find common ground, to find places where we can agree, and to show the world what it means to have these differences, but to coexist and to continue to love each other. And so we're part of a cohort that is lasting all the way through the inauguration. And so we get together every Tuesday night, and if anybody wants to be a part of that, it's not too late. You can join in, and would love to have more folks from the congregation take part in that. Send me an email, and I'll get you connected. And then, in addition to that, Alan is coming to UCC on Saturday, October 20th. I think that's right, whatever that Saturday is. And we're going to do a seminar in our sanctuary and invite folks to come together and to talk about this idea and to give us some skills, teach us some skills about how do we learn to listen better, how do we find empathy for people, and so I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yep, that event's free. Love to have as many folks from the congregation and the community.
Yeah,
invite your
folks,
friends,
invite
your
friends.
neighbors, invite your neighbors.
As an act of love.
As an act of love.
Well, that sounds fantastic, and
great.
It certainly has struck a chord with this congregation. It seems like it's striking a chord in the community, and so thank you for bringing that to us and for your leadership.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
If you would like to share your faith story on Formation, just send me an email. It's formation@uccftw.com. Take care. Have a great week.
Grace and peace.
Bye.
I want the last word.
Me too.
Have a good week.
See you next time.
God loves you.
So long.